Right, welcome back, and now more on Budget 2025. With us today is tax partner Lavindran Sandragasu from PricewaterhouseCoopers Malaysia to speak more on the budget. Hi, Mr. Lavindran, and thank you for joining us. Now, my first question for you, in regards to the budget which we heard earlier from the Prime Minister, the introduction of a 2% tax on dividend income exceeding 100,000 ringgit is a huge shift, aimed at diversifying tax revenue sources. And I think this measure targets higher income individuals and company owners, reflecting a progressive taxation approach, and that could alleviate the burden on wage earners. What are your thoughts on this? How will this impact investment behavior among high net worth individuals? And really, what are the pros regarding the dividend tax overall?
Okay, thanks for inviting me on this call. So, of course, this initiative is more on broadening the tax base, and that's one of the steering points the government has taken. Now, of course, this tax is applicable to only dividends that are paid to individuals. Okay, so it's not dividends paid to companies. So I think that's an important point, because I think also there are other countries in this region whereby they do apply dividend tax, but also it's applicable to dividends paid to companies, right? So I think the target base for this dividend tax is limited to individuals. Now, I think to your question, whether it would impact investment behavior, I highly doubt it, because I think one thing is that the rate is not very significant. It's at 2%. I think if you compare with some of the other countries in the region, I think Thailand is about 10, Indonesia is about 10%. So I think we are starting at a lower rate. Now, of course, the rates can increase. There's nothing stopping that from happening. But I think to say that, it's going to stifle investment behavior, it may not be in the short term anyways, right? Now, of course, there are some right? So there are some exemptions in relation to this, and it's applicable from 2025, both residents and non-residents.
Right. Now, in regards to the sales and services tax rate, what kind of implications can we expect, and how do you see this affecting consumer spending patterns, especially among lower income groups?
Okay, so I think the Prime Minister has mentioned that there will be some possible price increases, right? And he did also mention that this expansion of the service tax base is not going to be affecting the lower income groups, or because it's not going to cover the essential items, right? So it's going to be expanded to the non-essential items, right? So higher value goods or goods that are imported, right? So in addition to that, there are also certain services relating to commercial services. So it includes financial institutions, fees, etc. That could also come under this expanded service tax ambit. Now, those kind of transactions are generally B2B. So there will be very limited impact on the man on the road.
Right. Mr. Lavindran, now we all heard about the carbon tax, and to the layman, right, what does this mean? And really, could this lead to increased operational cost for companies? But, we know that it would also promote greener practices. Can you elaborate on how this tax might influence corporate behavior and environmental policies in Malaysia?
Okay. Firstly, the carbon tax that is being proposed is fairly limited. because it is supposed to impact the energy producing industry, or electricity generators, as well as the steel producers, right? So it's only limited to those two main industries. Now, of course, they are the biggest CO2 or greenhouse gas emitters in the country, representing almost 80%. Now, in terms of whether a carbon tax could actually impact prices. Now, I think in some countries, particularly in Singapore, where carbon tax was introduced, there was a certain increase of about 1% during the initial years in terms of the electricity tariff. Now, but we have to look at it slightly differently, because Singapore is generally an open market. There are different power generators that can sell electricity into the broader market, right? But Malaysia is not operating in that manner, right? And also we do have the ICPT programs, which sort of manages the subsidy, and you can see that in your your electricity bill, those ICPT adjustments. So it can be that some of those adjustments will be taken into account, because I think some of the carbon tax are also to be used to subsidize more greener technologies, right? So particularly if you look at the steel manufacturers, one of the reasons for higher emissions is because of the technology that they use. So if they move away from those kind of high CO2 producing technologies, of course, it's going to have a fair amount of capital investment. But if they do move away, then of course the carbon produced will be much lower. And similarly for the electricity generators, I think the biggest carbon generators are from the coal-fired power plants. Again, technology could be used to change the carbon dioxide generation. So I think it would have some impact to the climate policies that some of these industries are taking. And I think the idea is there, but again, we'll have to see how it really, does it really move the needle for these industries to actually move towards more of greener technologies. So that's something that we have to wait and see.
Right. I think earlier in the announcement, we also hear about the sugar tax, right? Now, my question is, we know sugar tax, and it's aimed to discourage excessive sugar consumption, by imposing levies on sugary beverages. And while it may lead to higher prices for these products, its effectiveness in altering consumer habits remains to be seen. So, what insights can you share about its potential long-term health benefits versus immediate economic impacts, and how would it really impact Malaysians in general? And does it really make a difference in regards to people's daily spendings?
Okay, yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think if I can just put it plainly, like if you go to a mamak shop and ask the guy for a teh tarik, now this sugar tax is not going to be impacting that consumption, right? Because the sugar tax is applicable on carbonated, flavored drinks, fruit juices, etc. And they have a certain sugar threshold that has to be met in order for the excise duty or the so-called sugar tax to apply on these items, right? So Malaysians, we are very used to teh tariks and all the rest of it, right? So from that perspective, the consumption behavior may not change, right? Of course, then you look at all the other carbonated drinks and all that. Yes, that potentially could change, but of course, as we know, there's also certain substitutes to sugar that you can manage the level of the sugar content. So I think if you take all of this together, whether that's going to have a significant impact, I suppose the jury is going to be out there.
Right. I think we also heard about the global minimum tax. How do you think this will affect Malaysia's attractiveness as a destination for foreign investment?
I think tax is one aspect of investment decisions that companies take, right? And this global minimum tax is going to be applicable throughout the world, right? So most countries, most developing countries, most developed countries are going to implement some sort of global minimum tax, right? Just from a layman's basis, right? A global minimum tax is essentially, you have to be paying a certain level of tax in any country, okay, that you operate in. So if you go below that certain tax rate, you have to pay a top up, right? So if you look at some of the developing countries, we offer a lot of incentives, tax incentive. You probably would have heard, and you would have heard in this budget as well. Now, so this tax incentive may result in the amount of tax that you pay in any one country to be reduced. So when you apply a global minimum tax in any country, you would then have to pay for the difference based on the threshold, right? So I think if you look at it from that perspective, I think Malaysia has also done the right thing, because if you don't tax that difference here in Malaysia, some other country is going to take that, particularly if you are part of a global organization, right? And there's obviously certain thresholds. Now, I think what was mentioned in the budget is that they're looking at some qualified refundable tax credits. So these are tax credits which are given to companies in order to sort of mitigate some of these additional taxes that they would have to pay, right? But there are some conditions that you have to meet, like, because this is refundable, potentially you have to pay back the government after 4 years, right? That's what has been provided globally. So there are a lot of things that you need to take into account. But I think the point about the effectiveness of Malaysia coming into a global minimum tax regime, I think it's not going to change very much, right? As I said, there are other also factors, in terms of skilled labor, etc., that needs to be taken into account.
Right, right, right. Thank you very much, Mr. Lavindran, for joining us tonight. Very insightful comments. And right, that's it for this edition of Bernama News for now. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And thank you. I'm Mukesh Babadi. That's all for Bernama News tonight. Thank you.